Hello. What inspired you to dress the way you do?
Not that question again. Well, I suppose the boredom of everyday life, you know, and I think everybody else looks dull in comparison to me, so that's the reason, really.
Boy George isn't just the flamboyant star we see on stage. Behind the makeup was a boy who had a violent household and spent time in prison, yet achieved outrageous fame and now spends time juicing and chanting. Quiz Time, which global sports icon did George once crawl through nightclub security just to meet, only to be called a very pretty boy? Drop your guess in the comments. We'll reveal the full story later. Stay tuned for the wild night he spent with Andy Warhol and the truth hidden inside Culture Club's biggest hits. But before we dive into the glamour, feuds, and reinventions, we have to go back to where it all started, because George's early life holds pivotal moments that changed everything. Early life. Growing up in the 1960s and 70s, Southeast London wasn't the romantic, carefree childhood people like to imagine, at least not for George Allen O'Dowd. Born in 1961 at Barnhurst Hospital, Boy George came into a world where working-class families packed into modest homes, kids roamed the streets without mobile phones, and the soundtrack of life was a mixture of glam rock and gritty reality. But while other kids played outside, George often came home to something much darker. A household ruled by fear, with a father whose charm to outsiders hid a violent, terrifying temper behind closed doors. There were days when young George would find his mother, Dinah, hiding under the kitchen table, screaming, while his father loomed overhead with a knife, a memory that never left him. In a house full of siblings, George felt oddly alone, dubbing himself the pink sheep of the family, bright, defiant, and unmistakably different. From as young as 6, he knew he was gay, a realization that, in the harsh streets of 1970s London, marked him as a target. He was bullied at school, attacked by gangs of skinheads, and eventually expelled for his eccentric style long before eccentricity was fashionable. Yet in the middle of the chaos, music and fashion became his secret lifelines. Inspired by David Bowie and T-Rex, he crafted himself into living art, falling in with London's underground punk and new romantic scene. Squatting in London flats, decorating his walls with magazine clippings and rebellion, George found freedom and friends who, like him, had run from broken homes to chase something beautiful. It was in this wild, neon-lit world that the boy who once felt invisible learned to stand out unapologetically. Nonetheless, standing out would soon thrust him into a fame storm even more intense and far more dangerous than anything he had survived so far. Career and success. In 1981, after a brief and messy stint with Bow Wow Wow, Boy George struck out on his own, forming Culture Club with a few fellow outsiders. Their sound was fresh, their image was unforgettable, and George's soulful voice and androgynous style were like nothing the mainstream had ever seen. When Do You Really Want to Hurt Me hit the charts in 1982, it wasn't just a song. It was a coded cry from George's real-life secret romance with drummer John Moss, heartbreak hidden in plain sight. Fame exploded faster than anyone was ready for. After a now legendary appearance on The Tonight Show with Joan Rivers, George became a household name in America almost overnight. Suddenly, the pink sheep was adored by millions, but under the surface, the cracks were widening. As Culture Club soared to Grammy wins and global superstardom, George's struggles with addiction, identity, and love grew harder to hide. By the mid-'80s, the secret relationship with Moss had turned toxic, spilling into backstage fights and fueling George's spiraling heroin addiction. When Culture Club fractured in 1986, many thought George would fade away, but instead, he reinvented himself. Immersing in underground club scenes, spinning house music as a DJ, and even launching the risky musical Taboo based on his chaotic youth, George proved he wasn't just a pop star. He was a survivor and shapeshifter. His career highs and collapses mirrored the emotional chaos he had always battled. But through it all, he never stopped creating. Still, fame and reinvention only tell half the story, because behind the music and the scandals, Boy George's personal lifestyle evolution would become one of his most surprising transformations. Lifestyle Insights, Art Beyond the Stage. Even at the height of culture club mania, Boy George wasn't just about music. He was creating art in every form he could. In recent years, he's returned to that passion more seriously, releasing a collection called Fame, featuring bold portraits of icons like David Bowie and Amy Winehouse. His art reflects the same themes that shaped his life: identity, rebellion, and resilience. Selling pieces through Castle Fine Art Galleries, George has turned his visual work into another form of storytelling, this time without a microphone or stage. For George, painting is therapy, a way of processing the chaotic journey that fame, addiction, and reinvention threw at him. From party animal to health guru. It might shock fans who remember the wild 80s, but today, Boy George's mornings are more likely to start with a green juice than a champagne toast. Around 2014, he dove headfirst into a raw vegan lifestyle, crediting the diet for losing over 70 pounds and finding mental clarity. He became so committed that he even made his own almond milk and raw desserts. Recently, George candidly admitted he's using Mounjaro injections, a modern weight loss tool, as well, joking, "Isn't everyone?" alongside cutting out dairy and wheat once again. As mentioned earlier, this health evolution is part of a broader pattern with George. When he transforms, he goes all in, turning past extremes into new disciplines. Inner peace, the unseen side. Behind the sarcasm and glam, Boy George has quietly cultivated a spiritual life few people know about. He practices Buddhist chanting daily, often using the mantra Nam Myoho Renge Kyo to center himself before shows and interviews. Influenced by mindfulness teachings and the three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought, George has worked to rewire the chaotic emotional habits born in his turbulent early life. Every morning includes moments of meditation or even pep talks to himself in the mirror, small rituals that help him face the world without the armor he once needed so badly. This spiritual grounding has become a pillar of his personal growth, though, as we'll see later, the battle for emotional peace has never been simple. Hats, humor, and homebody quirks. Of course, Boy George will always be Boy George. His obsession with hats and headgear borders on legendary. He once joked he feels naked without something on his head. His collection ranges from towering headdresses to simple bowlers, and each piece feels like a little shield, a reminder of the flamboyance that first gave him power. Yet away from cameras, George lives more like an eccentric artist than a pop diva. He loves scouring thrift shops for vintage finds, filling his home with antiques, incense burners, and quirky religious icons. These days, he's just as happy staying in to sip herbal tea and sketch new designs as he once was, chasing neon-lit nights. In fact, he once famously said, "I'd rather have a cup of tea than sex." The kind of dry humor that only someone who's lived both extremes can truly get away with. Philanthropy and quiet acts of kindness. Beyond his personal transformations, George has quietly put a lot of his energy into helping others. He's worked with charities like Safe Kids Worldwide and the Albert Kennedy Trust, focusing on protecting LGBTQ+ youth and marginalized communities. Unlike some celebrities, he rarely makes a show of it. Some of his most meaningful gestures, like paying for fans' medical treatments or helping old friends through rehab, never make headlines. It's a side of him that's rooted not just in fame, but in having survived so much hardship himself. His philanthropy is personal, not performative, a reflection of a man who knows what it's like to feel invisible and wants to make sure others don't. Nonetheless, behind all the juicing, chanting, and quiet acts of kindness, Boy George's real story of connection through love, heartbreak, loyalty, and lifelong feuds was still being written. And it's here where things get even more personal. Relationships and connections. When it came to relationships, Boy George's life was often as chaotic and colorful as his music videos. At the heart of it all was his secret romance with Culture Club drummer John Moss, a passionate but toxic relationship that fueled some of the band's biggest hits like Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? Their love story was hidden from the public, yet it simmered in every lyric, every glance across the stage, until the tensions tore both the band and their bond apart. Years later, their unresolved emotions would explode again in court battles, proving some wounds never fully heal. Yet it wasn't all heartbreak and betrayal. George formed deep, loyal friendships with fellow outsiders from his early Blitz Club days like Marilyn and Princess Julia, bonds that endured even as fame swept him into a different world. And, in a moment few knew about, Princess Diana herself broke royal protocol to seek George out at a charity event, calling him a true survivor, a memory he still treasures today. Then there were the brushes with legends, like the night teenage George crawled through nightclub security just to meet Muhammad Ali, earning a playful, unforgettable compliment from the greatest of all time. These personal connections, whether fleeting or lasting, reflected the same truth. Underneath the glamour and sarcasm was someone constantly searching for real acceptance and love. Still, fame and connection always came at a cost, and as Boy George's star rose, the financial twists, battles, and reinventions that followed were just as dramatic as anything on stage. Income and net worth. As of 2025, Boy George's estimated net worth sits around $50 million, a fortune built on decades of music royalties from hits like Karma Chameleon, relentless touring, and even a profitable art career through Castle Fine Art. Yet his finances haven't been without drama. After a brutal lawsuit from former Culture Club bandmate John Moss, George agreed to pay a $2.3 million settlement, a figure that still lingers over his finances today. On top of that, his touring company, Miss Pacha Touring, went bankrupt in 2023, leaving nearly £1.37 million in debt and sparking major financial restructuring. To keep momentum, George recently starred in Moulin Rouge on Broadway and continues to headline festivals and art shows, hustling harder than ever to balance passion with obligation. Yet even millions in courtroom battles only tell part of the story, because where Boy George chose to live and the battle to hold on to his personal sanctuary says even more about who he became. Real estate. Boy George's most iconic home has always been The Logs, a sprawling Gothic-style mansion perched on the edge of Hampstead Heath in London. He bought the 6-bedroom, 5-bathroom property at the height of Culture Club's fame in the 1980s, transforming the 19th-century building into his personal sanctuary over nearly 4 decades. Complete with stained glass windows, a meditation tower, and walls adorned with his own artwork. The mansion wasn't just a home. It was a reflection of every version of George he had ever been. But even this sanctuary wasn't immune to the storms of fame. After the legal battle with John Moss, George attempted to sell the property in 2022 for £17 million, but ultimately decided to rent it out for £65,000 a month instead, preferring flexibility while he toured and worked to settle debts. The home even survived planning disputes and neighborly tension, a testament to George's ability to dig in and protect what mattered most. Still, while Boy George's homes have been grand and symbolic, his taste in vehicles reveals a side of him that's just as fascinating and sometimes just as surprising. Vehicles and cars. When it comes to cars, Boy George has always leaned toward classic luxury, with a Rolls-Royce being the crown jewel of his collection. It fits his larger-than-life persona perfectly, polished, grand, and unmistakably stylish. While there aren't wild tabloid tales of reckless driving or flashy supercar fleets, the understated elegance of his choices says a lot. George has always preferred making a statement with presence, not speed. As for motorbikes, there's little evidence of George ever chasing life on 2 wheels. Perhaps after surviving the chaos of his youth and the roller coaster of fame, he decided he didn't need any extra danger. When it comes to air travel, George doesn't own a private jet, but he's no stranger to jet-setting life. Especially during his peak touring days and art exhibitions, he's hopped between continents, though he tends to travel commercial or via charters rather than owning the sky himself. Yachts, however, gave him a surprising new stage. In 2022, George partnered with Virgin Voyages, spinning DJ sets aboard their luxury cruise ships. It was a surreal full-circle moment, The man who once fled the gray streets of Eltham to find glamour, now entertaining crowds on the open sea, blending adventure, music, and a little mischief all at once. There's no record of him getting around by helicopter either, though if you know George, he doesn't need a helicopter entrance to make a grand arrival. A killer hat and a bit of attitude usually do the job just fine. Nevertheless, while Boy George's vehicles offer a glimpse into his tastes and quirks, it's his current life, both the struggles and the triumphs, that truly show how far he's come. Current lifestyle. Today, Boy George stands as a man who has outlived his scandals, reinvented his legacy, and embraced his contradictions. He's currently lighting up Broadway as Harold Zeidler in Moulin Rouge the musical, while also touring festivals across the UK and showcasing his Fame art collection. As mentioned earlier, these projects aren't just passion. They're part of his comeback hustle after settling the multi-million-pound lawsuit with John Moss. Beyond the stage, George is quietly working on reviving Taboo, the musical inspired by his wild youth, and collaborating with artists like Peter Murphy to stay creatively fresh. Social media offers glimpses of his daily life now, mindfulness, art, and moments of humor that show he's at peace being both Boy George and George O'Dowd. After all the chaos, the addictions, the courtrooms, and the neon lights, Boy George has proven he doesn't just survive, he transforms. Well, if you loved seeing the wild, unexpected, and deeply human sides of Boy George, drop a comment below sharing what surprised you most. Make sure to like, subscribe, and check out our other deep dives into the icons who changed pop culture forever.